biggest money in the world and the most well-informed money in the world is gobbling it up across the globe like it's going out of style. All I can tell you is that something very, very big in my mind is happening with both gold and silver. It is not what we are being led to believe. I believe it is foundational for the new system that we are transitioning to, little by little, then bang, all at once. And I think if you save in dollars, honest to God, you're destined to go broke in this environment, if I'm right.
Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks for being here. That was the owner of Miles Franklin and a longtime friend of SGT Report and myself, Andy Schectman. In this one, guys, we process the murder of Charlie Kirk. And yes, the nutballs are back out in force again, claiming that Charlie faked his assassination and he's still alive. Honestly, folks, if we can't grasp reality, what chance do we have of saving our country? Beyond that, what chance do any of us have of saving ourselves if we can't deal with reality? Well, we talk about that and the changing of our economic system. It's happening right before our eyes. You can call it a reset if you can survive it. Before we start this important broadcast, just a quick word about a great sponsor. The science is in. A clinical trial found that just 10 grams of collagen a day for 8 weeks led to a roughly 20% increase in skin hydration and a 17% improvement in elasticity, while also visibly reducing wrinkle depth. If you want to help improve your skin health, it's clear that collagen is essential. Multi-Collagen provides my skin with 5 types of premium collagen to help attack wrinkles from every angle. And I'm seeing smoother skin, more elasticity, fewer fine lines, and a more youthful glow. Plus, Multi-Collagen mixes smoothly with my morning coffee or tea. There's no clumping and zero added flavor. I do put it in my coffee every morning. Do yourself a big favor and grab yourself a bag of ageless Multi-Collagen now for 51% off only at healthwithsgt.com. Plus, by ordering today, you'll also receive free VIP live health and fitness coaching for life, a free ebook titled The 14 Foods for Amazing Skin, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and free shipping with your order. Once again, this offer is only available at healthwithsgt.com. The link is below. Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks so much for being here on September 11th, 2025. Guys, I'm really anxious and excited to have this conversation with Andy Schectman, the owner of Miles Franklin, a company that has done more than $10 billion in precious metal sales, a longtime friend of mine, an early sponsor of SGT Report, and a kindred spirit to be sure. Andy, welcome back.
Hey man, thanks for having me, Sean, and I very much appreciate being here.
I really appreciate you. And guys, if you're sensing a little melancholy in our voices, it is because yesterday, 9/10/25, Charlie Kirk was murdered, assassinated, a political assassination in Utah at Utah Valley University, as you all know. And we're just processing it. We're all processing it. And I really think in my heart of hearts, Andy, I feel like it is an inflection point, a turning point. Ironically, the name of Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, I think yesterday was a turning point, an inflection point in U.S. history. I really do. There's people celebrating his murder. And there are others of us who are right-minded, who are mourning the loss of a great patriot, a Christian man, a father, and a husband.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, you know, before I get into that, this country has done more for me than I ever deserved. I thank God every day I was born in this country. What I saw over the last 4 years, Sean, the lawlessness, the open borders, the perception of election integrity, or the lack of integrity, the perception of a two-tier justice system, the wokeness, all of this nonsense, not to mention the supposed peaceful protests in Minneapolis is the reason I left Minneapolis and moved to Florida, but it was a rallying cry for me. I spoke out, I don't know, vehemently against all of that nonstop, continuously during the Biden administration, and yet always tried to do it in a respectful manner. Because after all, I think that's what made this country great, is the ability to have a different opinion. What we saw yesterday, to me, if I may, is it's the peak of obsessive crusade of hatred and aimed at originally or almost entirely President Trump. I guess you could say his movement, the MAGA movement, but really anyone daring to think outside the left's approved narrative. And, I don't know, for 10 years now, the left and its media allies have been nonstop pouring venom on all of us, and every broadcast, every headline, every late night host who I can't stand anymore, every washed up celebrity chanting the same nonsense that Trump is a dictator, MAGA is a cult, or conservatives are evil. They've built this entire culture, man, on despising Trump supporters. It's the norm. And it's celebrated, like you said. People celebrating Charlie Kirk's death is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. But it's worse, it's incentivized. And I guess this is what happens when any normal, rational political debate is replaced with a call to annihilate your opponents. And I remember when Biden was standing on that stage, the red stage, saying that 75 million of us Americans are extremists, or when the knucklehead Kamala was chuckling her way through, softball puff piece interviews and declaring Trump supporters enemies of democracy. But even worse, it's like the brain dead media runs wall to wall propaganda painting half of this country as domestic terrorists. And what does anyone think that this produces? It produces rage. And now Charlie Kirk gets shot. But what really gets me, Sean, is, and I mean, I walked in this morning, I turned on the TV in our studio here, and I almost fell over seeing these same disgusting people that are now, you know, they're trying to stir this climate already, spinning it, blaming it on guns and the Second Amendment, or insisting it's an isolated incident. I don't know, man. They've made political violence acceptable, and look what they've done to the campuses. They've turned them into battlegrounds where they were originally about free thought and discourse, and now it's just hatred. And when this shit happens, pardon my French, and spills into real blood, they act surprised. In my mind, the responsibility of this lies with the media, the Democrats, the influencers, every coward who has been fueling this crap, this hysteria since 2015. This is their creation. And yesterday was a very, very, very sad day. That image that I saw, that gratuitous image, will never leave my mind. And this guy was a father and a husband and a genius. I mean, flat out genius. And all of these anti-MAGA people who think that they get it. They've learned more and more about less and less till they know everything about nothing. And it's just absolutely deplorable to me. Political aspirations aside, beliefs aside, the dude was a genius, and he debated politely. That's what this country was all about, man. That's the America I remember growing up in, and part of the reason that I left the state of Minnesota because of it. And I would just like to extend my deepest condolences and sympathies to his family, and to all of us who understand what he stood for. So I don't know. Thanks for letting me jump on the soapbox there for a minute, but I had to get off my chest because it was hard for me to sleep last night thinking about all of this stuff. And I don't know. Maybe this will wake up some of the people on the left who see that some of the people in their own camp are actually cheering and celebrating the death of a young man, a father and a husband. And I can't think, it kind of like the GoFundMe pages for this guy who killed the beautiful young Ukrainian gal on the train. And one last thing, I don't know about you, but I don't see the massive protests in the streets in Charlotte or in Utah, where the shop owners have to close their shops, and the looting and the burning, and like we saw in Minneapolis, the supposed peaceful protests in Minneapolis. And this whole thing is just, it's got to stop, man. And these people need to be called out as far as I'm concerned. But anyways, thank you. And I apologize for getting a little off course there.
No. Listen, hey, I appreciate your candor because I'm feeling the exact same things. Many of us are. And I truly believe that September 10th, 2025 was an absolute inflection point, a turning point in the United States. and it's going to go one way or the other. But for the people that carried this out, and I think it might have been a professional hit. I mean, the shooter got away like a Jason Bourne movie. By the way, the FBI has released a person of interest, but you mentioned Charlie Kirk being a genius. We resonate at the same frequency, I got to tell you, because the moment I realized Charlie Kirk is a genius in service of our true history and truth, I will play this clip at the end of our broadcast after we say goodbye to Andy. It is profoundly, profoundly genius, and his grasp of history and biblical truth is beyond anyone else. Meanwhile, people like this scumbag celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk. He says, "No one mourns the wicked." Well, I got to tell you, the wickedness all comes from the left. And by the way, one of Charlie's last posts to Rumble was titled, "We need an all-out war on crime or more innocents will die."
Hmm.
The day before he
Yeah.
was murdered in Utah. By the way, a person of interest has finally been released in Charlie's assassination. Here's the image of the man that got away. If this is indeed the shooter, now, here's what's interesting. Not only did the shooter make an escape, and I don't know that any normie could pull off that shot under such high pressure with thousands of people watching, a direct shot to the jugular and Charlie's neck, and then get away. That seems like a nation state or alphabet agency operation to me, but either way, they have found the weapon used, they claim, and they also claim that rifle ammo in the Kirk assassination was engraved with trans-Tifa ideology, law enforcement memo claims. I'm coming back to you, Andy. Look, whether it was a nation state, well oiled operation to murder Charlie Kirk and chill speech in this country and send a message to people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and Andy Schectman and Alex Jones and anybody else who speaks out, or whether it was a lone nut, I tend to think it was more organized than a lone nut. The truth is that this country's in a lot of trouble because the brainwashed left, they celebrate the engravings found on that bullet, on those bullets, even if that's a misdirect by the deep state to cause more infighting and chaos in our country, Andy. This we've got to get to the bottom of this, and we've got to rout this out. We've got to rout this out, this evil that is taking control of our society, this nihilistic evil. That's what it is. The left is nihilistic and godless. And that's what you get as a society. Harley Schlanger calls it the collapse of empire. We are now going through the collapse of an empire.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. I mean, you know, the last 4 years prior to the Trump administration, I was often quoted as saying that the actions of the administration were too stupid to be stupid, that it was driving towards a goal, a reset to you know, purge the system, if you will, and start over under a new authoritarian regime, one that probably would have rolled out a central bank digital currency. When you look at Lael Brainerd, who was part of the administration there and had developed the CBDC while at the Boston Fed with MIT, and of course the constant narrative that was coming out of the White House was just ridiculous. The loss of meritocracy, to have hoped that we would get past that in this new administration, that people would see that that's not what the American spirit is. But when it comes to completely, when I think about my own, like you said, and Andy Schectman, when I think about all of the rhetoric that I talk about, that it is, I guess you could say, it's not meant to be anti-left. What it is, it's meant to be American. It's meant to extol the virtues of this country, the things that have allowed me to reach a level of success where hard work, where initiative, where doing the right thing means something. It is concerning, it is frightening, but it seems to me that it's not going away. And I put so much of the square on right at the feet of the media, because there are a lot of people that I know. I live in a country club in Florida. There's some very affluent people, very well-read people, very intelligent people. They just continuously read the wrong shit. And the stuff that they are reading is fueling hatred. It is fueling a very naive view of the world, and one that is intolerant, has no space or room for discourse without it becoming viscerally agitated, to say the least. And that isn't what this country was all about. And yeah, you're right. I just worry that this type of this type of event is not an isolated event. I think we'll continue to see more of this until we have the country wake up to the fact that so much of what we are being fed in terms of information, and many of the people in Congress should just literally be thrown out, exposed for what they are, and go back to what it was when you and I were kids growing up, the ideals that we lived under. And I don't know how we've gotten so far away from it in such a short period of time. I have my own podcast, Sean, and I call it Little by Little, and it speaks to logarithmic decay, where things happen little by little by little, then all at once. And if you think about so many of the things that have happened over the last 5, 6 years, cancel culture, the degradation of the First Amendment, wokeism, the issues with the border, all of these things that we saw happen little by little by little, then bang. And worse yet, you have so many people in this country who not only think that is okay, but celebrate it, and most importantly, like we see here today, have taken it to a whole nother level in terms of what happens when there are conflicting and different viewpoints. This is a guy that would go to college campuses, and yes, he would certainly, you could argue, eviscerate the left viewpoint, but do so in a very polite and intellectual manner. The fact that is, in fact, my mother-in-law just said to me the other day that he was on his way, he was going to Minneapolis to do this, and she said, I really want to go see him. He was going to the University of Minnesota. And then this happened. I don't know, Sean. I don't even know how to put it into words, but it is something that transcends everything that I focus on with economics and geopolitical events. But the reason I spoke so much about this kind of stuff over the last 4 or 5 years is because I believe all of it is connected. It is interconnected. And well, God help this country. God help this country. Maybe he'll go down as being a martyr in the respect that maybe, just maybe, this wakes up some of the people on the left who are watching their own party, in many cases, applaud this, cheer this, say, well, hate speech breeds hatred, and that kind of nonsense. And I don't know. All I can say is shame on them and shame on that way of thinking, and call me old-fashioned, but it just doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah, I do think it's a tipping point, and I think Charlie's legacy will be that his message, his wise words, his courageous words to young people at these colleges, showing up in the belly of the beast to take on really the least informed among us in many cases, and to do so with such grace. I think that message will be resonated and amplified times 10, perhaps times 100, for hopefully generations to come, because what we're now faced with is the stark reality that political assassinations in the United States are celebrated by a good number of the country. Okay, they celebrated at the pot shots taken at Trump, wishing that bullet had connected. They celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk. I think we live in a post-truth era at this point, where some of us can speak the language and are well educated enough to have discourse, like Charlie, like you, like me. But you have a very hard time having similar discourse with some of the well-educated people you described. They think they're well educated, and they're completely misled. And I'll just say one more thing. I want your thoughts on this. When I say we live in a post-truth era, we all saw with our eyes what happened on September 10th. Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck. Again, another message, by the way. They shot him in the throat. They wanted him to stop talking. They hit him in the jugular. It was a direct hit. I think it was a professional hit. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But the shooter got away, and we live in a post-truth era where there are people on the internet right now, people whose names you might recognize, Andy, claiming that what happened yesterday was fake and Charlie's still alive. The same shit they were saying about Butler, PA when they said Trump participated in his own assassination attempt.
No, I mean it's what more can you say about that? When you see people like on what's that, The View, saying, "Oh yeah, that he was wearing a bandage on his ear one day, and then there's nothing there the next." By taking that position, what does that say to the family of the gentleman, the firefighter who was shot and killed defending his family, laying
They
on
claim
top
that's
of
fake
them?
too. They claim he
Yeah,
didn't
that's
exist or
fake too.
that's fake. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to look. I told my wife yesterday, this is the line in the sand for me. Because if they're telling us to believe that Charlie Kirk is still alive and yesterday was fake, those people are either insane or they're in on it. They're being paid. I don't know what. And are there anomalies with every shoot? Like the guy standing behind him looking to give like hand signals, like they're baseball third base coaches? Sure, but maybe his own security detail needs to be looked into because the man was shot in broad daylight and he's dead. He's dead, period. Can we face the
Yeah.
facts in this country, guys? We don't need to live in a post truth era. And for those that want us to live in that era, I think that they are vipers. And I just, enough, enough, enough. I
Well,
just,
go back to like when President Kennedy was assassinated. All you would see on every television station when you look back at the reels were people hysterically crying and being sad for this country and for the loss of life of a president. Of course, I was too young. Certainly, um, I wasn't able to see what the other side was their reactions, but I have a hard time believing that it would be tolerated for anything. There was no social media, but can you only imagine if you turned on the news back then and there were people celebrating that type of an event, and to see it happening now and to see it happening in the way that it is I mean, it's all over Twitter, that type of behavior. It's absolutely insane to me. And you're right. It's not, I don't even know how you take it on the right way, Sean. I don't know what you do. I've been trying to spread truth for a very long time and speak out against this lunacy, but this takes it to a whole different level. It's very frightening. It's concerning, to say the least, to try and have a civil debate and to talk about facts on an intellectual level, only then to have yourself silenced from 250 yards away with a high power rifle to the neck. Um, I don't know. I don't even know what to say, man. It's a sad day, but I thank you for bringing it up and talking about it. It does need to be addressed. It does need to be talked about, and it shouldn't be forgotten.
well, and I'll just say one last thing. You know, the bankster class has dumbed this country down. The Rockefeller bankster class has dumbed this country down to the point where what we're discussing is now our sad reality. And in 1963, when they blew Kennedy's head off in Dealey Plaza, people were educated and we were together. We lived really through this optic of America. We were all Americans. We were on that same page. And now they've divided us and conquered us to the degree where now people celebrate political murders of young men, 31-year-old men showing up at college campuses just to speak to students. It's
Hmm.
it's absolutely insane. Um, all right. So when I talk about the collapse of empire, Harley
Yeah.
made the point in my interview that this is what we see time and time again when empires begin to collapse. We see political assassinations. We see the class that's losing their power and trying to retain it kill the opposition. And I would make the case that that's what we saw yesterday, September 10th, 2025, just as we may be seeing in Germany with the AfD party members. We have 7 candidates of the AfD party in Germany. That's the Make Germany Great Again party, essentially, just dropping dead like flies over the last couple of months moving into the election. So political assassinations are now happening all over the world, and it's our job to call it out. I mean, we live in a post-truth era where I think collapse is at hand, and that brings us to the dollar. That brings us to gold and silver. Today, silver is up 51 cents to 41.91, almost that $42 mark. Gold at 3,652, Bitcoin at 114,000. Global broad money supply, by the way, off the charts. Let me share this from the Cabesi letter. Global broad money supply rose 9.3% year over year in July to a record $140 trillion. I got to tell you, Andy, they just keep printing all over the world and there's no end in sight. So let's talk about precious metals. What is a $3,650 gold price telling us?
It tells me less than what we see on the periphery. Um, what I see on the periphery, or not focusing on the price, but focusing on what the biggest money in the world is doing, I'll break it down into a couple camps. For the past 6 years, we've seen central bank purchases that have been front running where we're ultimately going to a level that no one's ever seen before. The central banks are not just the most well-funded traders on the planet, they're the most well-informed. They're the ones that reclassified gold tier 1 in the Basel III reclassification. They are the ones who understand ultimately what's going to happen to the currencies, what's going to happen to maybe a new monetary system. I would argue that with the passage of the Genius Act, we have a new monetary system. We can get into that if you'd like, but what I'm really getting at is what's very stark to me is the amount of deliveries that we've been seeing on COMEX. And so what happened for the last 5 years has been 6 years, has been central banks buying everything up, but the United States not being part of it. The United States understands what's happening right now. Fortunately, it is my belief someone within the Trump administration got to President Trump and said, this needs to be done or we're in very big trouble. Now, before I tell you what happens, let's just talk about some of what's happened. Let's just talk about some of the clues we've seen along the way. On Easter Sunday, you have President Trump say, he who has the gold makes the rules, the golden art of negotiating. You have Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said we want to remonetize the asset side of the balance sheet, that I would like to preside, he says, over a new monetary system, which I would argue he is right now. But when you look at the United States government balance sheet, you see it just over $5 trillion. And when you talk about its assets, the largest asset is student debt, about 1.4, 1.5 trillion. Believe it or not, it is. And it's about 40+% of their asset base. You're not monetizing that. The second largest asset is military bases, guns, bullets. You're not monetizing that. Land being the third largest asset, I guess you could monetize that, put amusement parks or hotels or whatever on national land. To a degree you could, but in my mind it is gold. Now, he has backed away from that a little bit, and I think it's because he talked about it in February, and someone said, Scott, what are you doing, dude? It's too early to be saying this, because since November, Sean, we've become a net importer of gold and silver. We've never been a net importer of gold. And the amount of gold ounces, the amount of money in terms of gold and silver that's coming into the country is unlike anything that anybody has ever seen, ever, never. And I think it's very important to understand that this has become a trend. This is not a one-off. It's been every single month over month over month. Just the first week of September, we saw 3,626 gold contracts delivered into COMEX. That's almost $2 billion. We saw 11,000 silver contracts just in the first week delivered into COMEX. That's over $2 billion. You're talking $4 billion worth of gold and silver delivered in the first week of September. This is what we've seen every single month since November. The biggest, most well-funded, but more importantly, well-informed money in the United States is standing for delivery. Now, some of it's leaving COMEX, some of it isn't. But the point of it is that we have never seen the amount of gold that we are seeing coming in that originally came in supposedly under the guise of tariffs. I called BS on that right away. This has nothing to do with tariffs. This has nothing to do with arbitrage. We are reshoring the gold. Now, some more comments that we saw along the way. Judy Shelton, who was on my podcast, she was Trump's nominee to run the Fed in his first administration. She said to me, Andy, in no uncertain terms, President Trump has told me when I was part of his advisory team that on July 4th, 2026, which will be a very, very big day for him that celebrates the 250th anniversary of the country. He's going to make a big deal of it. He is going to peg to the back end of the bond market gold, to the treasury market. He's going to do it. And that he's flat out told me that. And I said, do you think he'll revalue gold? I said, ironically, it's held in what's called the gold revaluation account. Now, I had this discussion with her 4 or 5 months ago. And in more or less, she said, yes, I do believe that he will revalue gold. That's the name of it on our balance sheet, the gold revaluation account. Of course, Roosevelt confiscated gold in 1933 at 20 bucks, devalued the dollar by 40%, put gold at $35. Nixon, when he closed the gold window in 71 at $35, he revalued gold in 72 to 38 and in 73 to 42.22, both occasions devaluing the dollar. There are 3 examples in U.S. history. There have been others around the world more recently, but it's not about revaluing gold. It is about devaluing the dollar. And so I'll give you my thesis in a nutshell here, and maybe I'm stupid enough to say it, but I was the first one talking about BRICS in 2019, and everyone said I was stupid. And I did 5,000 YouTube videos on it, and lo and behold, now everyone understands what BRICS is. And we haven't heard the end of them yet, by the way, because there's a lot going on with gold on that side of the table too. But here's my thesis in a nutshell. If there is any nobility in what President Trump wants to do to bring back manufacturing, you have to ask yourself, how can you do that? We have a massive indebtedness. We owe $28 trillion in treasuries that come due by 2028, but we only take in $5 trillion in tax revenue. That gets us almost half the way there, or just over half the way there, but doesn't take into account our $3 trillion a year deficit. Puts 28 to plus 9 is 37, so you're about 1/3 of the way there. And what we need to come up with, just in things coming due, really, by 2028. So in terms of how do you do this without rates going parabolic? He wants to lower rates, right? He wants there to be a weak dollar. So you have a vacancy at the Fed. Who takes the position? Oh, that's Stephen Mirren. Stephen Mirren is the architect of the Mar-a-Lago Accord. What does he want? He wants a massively devalued dollar. What did Judy Shelton say? He's going to peg gold to the treasuries. Why? I'll get there in a second. So in order to do all of this, if you want to revalue or if you want to devalue the dollar, the best way to do it would be to revalue gold. History has shown that. Who would it benefit? It would benefit the central banks massively. All of the central banks have been buying it nonstop. We've been buying it like it's going out of style since November, so evidently it would benefit us too. And the procedure for doing this would be Trump would simply tell the Treasury Secretary to revalue gold. The Treasury Secretary would tell the Federal Reserve, revalue gold to this number. Now, James Rickards, who has been brought into the CIA or into the Pentagon by the CIA to simulate financial war games, has come out and publicly said $24,000 is his number.
Hey friends, pardon the interruption, just a real quick word. A growing body of research shows that when you diet, your body fights back. Levels of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, shoot up, while leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, drops. That's why most diets feel like an endless battle. The more weight you try to lose, the hungrier you get. It's not a willpower issue, it's literally biology. This is why you'll want to try my secret weight loss weapon. BioTrust's GLP-1 Elevate is designed to naturally trigger your body's own weight loss signals without drugs, prescriptions, or needles. It helps satiate and gives you a feeling of fullness, reduces cravings, reduces hunger hormones, and helps lose fat instead of muscle while supporting healthy blood sugar levels. Be sure to grab a bottle right now while it's 50% off and start experiencing real results only at trimwithsgt.com. Plus, by ordering right now, you're also guaranteed 2 free ebooks titled The 3-Week Diet and 53 Fat-Burning Smoothies and Milkshakes. That's trimwithsgt.com. The link is below.
James Rickards, who has been brought into the CIA or into the Pentagon by the CIA to simulate financial war games, has come out and publicly said $24,000 is his number. Whether it is or isn't, let me explain how it would simply work. And by the way, Trump and Congress, Trump does not need congressional approval to do this at all. He just tells them to do it and it's done, just like that. So Let's just pretend it's $24,000. Mike Maloney was saying 10,000. He does it by using M1 into the gold supply, and I believe it's M2 or even a broader M3, which we don't publish anymore. That would be the $24,000 number. Now, every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would give the Treasury General Account $1 trillion free and clear. And so if at 24,000, the Treasury General Account will get $6 trillion free and clear. It is an accounting gimmick. The Treasury issues gold certificates, gives them to the Fed. The Fed then prints that money. Those certificates, the Fed doesn't have claim on the gold, just the fiat value of it. The gold belongs to the American people, but they hold it in custody. The Fed then prints $6 trillion and gives it to the Treasury General Account. Now, this massively devalues the dollar, maybe as much by 60%. And it gives the Treasury $6 trillion to start to pay off its debt, right? So we'll talk about why this is happening. So if Judy is right, and they're going to peg the back end of the Treasury market to gold, if they do that, look at what they've accomplished. Number one, you create the Genius Act. What does the Genius Act do? It creates stable coins issued by all the banks and all the big corporations like Visa and MasterCard and Ameriexpress and whatever, all of them backed by U.S. Treasuries. This creates synthetic demand for the front end of the Treasury yield curve, where it is going to be losing demand, especially if they want to push rates down. It creates synthetic demand for it. But the bigger question is, how could you ever bring back your manufacturing? Triffin's dilemma is what Vice President Vance came out on White House letterhead, and he's spoken about it subsequently, saying Triffin's dilemma is such that it doesn't make sense for the United States to be the world reserve currency anymore. It isn't helping us. Triffin's dilemma says that if the dollar is the world reserve currency and everyone needs dollars to transact, we cannot provide enough dollars through trade alone. So those countries over time need to sell their currency, weakening it, to buy our currency, strengthening it. This is why we send manufacturing across the globe to a weak currency environment. It becomes much less to produce goods across the globe. And the benefit of that through all of these years has been not only are all of these countries giving us their finished products for dollars we create out of thin air, but then we expect them to take their excess reserves and place them into treasuries, which has kept interest rates low. It has kept asset prices high in this country and made all the goods we buy at Walmart and Target very cheap and inexpensive. It's been a great subsidy to the American consumer. But as Vice President Vance has publicly said, not only has it been a subsidy to the consumer, it's been a huge tax on the producer. We are a country where 60% of America does not have any education past high school. We are a country where AI is going to kneecap a lot of jobs and we make nothing. How do we bring back manufacturing? My mentor, Richard Russell, used to say there are two choices but for the Fed to inflate or default. Here's choice number 3, in my opinion, and I think this is where they're going. You soft default on the dollar. In other words, you speak of not really wanting, you show crumbs of the problems of being the world reserve currency. All around the world, you see countries that are now trading in local currencies and settling in what? Settling in gold. That is the whole premise of the BRICS nations. That is the whole premise of their new M-Bridge platform, and the rails that they are building will trade local currencies and settle in gold. We can go there if you want after. But to finish my thought here, so you have the stablecoin bill that will run the front end of the yield curve. It will fund the daily workings of the U.S. government. Judy says we will peg gold to the Treasury market in 5, 10, 20, 30, and 50-year Treasuries. The 30 and the 50-year Treasury may have a very small yield coupon, maybe 1% or less. The others, the 5, 10, and 20, will have a zero coupon bond. No interest on it. What is the interest? The interest is the price of gold. The more stupid we are with monetary policy and fiscal irresponsibility, the higher the price of gold goes. What does it enable us to do? If Jim is right and they revalue gold up to that level, whether it's 24,000, 20,000, 10,000, it's irrelevant. Whatever the number is, it devalues the dollar substantially. Pegging the back end of the yield curve to gold allows us to bring back manufacturing at a zero borrowing cost, a zero upfront borrowing cost. You bring back manufacturing at a 0% borrowing cost with the massively devalued dollar. you are then able to sell your products around the world. In other words, you give up on the world reserve status in an effort to entice demand, because it's gold backed, for our treasuries, in order for us, in kind of like an analogy to the Shawshank Redemption. We have a tube of crap we got to crawl through because we've destroyed the value of the dollar. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We have destroyed the dollar. And in order to get back to making things again, right, to producing things, to being talk about what we said earlier. We've gone so far away from our American culture with how stupid everything has become, like what we saw yesterday. But this is just as stupid. We've destroyed what is an amazing privilege. And now the only way to get back to what this country really is to find our ideals, to find our culture again, and to be the engine of manufacturing. There is no way that we can bring back manufacturing in a strong dollar environment. The shelves will be empty, the prices will go parabolic. It's the Great Depression. It doesn't work. In other words, being the world reserve currency is a massive tax on the future of this country. And for our children and our grandchildren to have a future, we must bring back manufacturing. We cannot rely on China for our pharmaceuticals and our aircraft components and all of the things that are very, very important strategically to this country. Regardless, we need to make stuff again. So the plan, in my mind, is to let gold go higher than anyone thinks possible. They'll let it rise between now and July, in my opinion, organically, slowly, organically. And if you would have told me at any time in my career, Sean, I remember when gold finally broke through 400, I'm like, my goodness gracious, it finally got through 400. If you would have told me it's at 3650 and no one's talking about it, I would have bet you anything in the world. So in other words, they're going to let it go higher before they revalue it. But the act of revaluing gold is more about devaluing the dollar, which is what the Mar-a-Lago Accord is all about. Devalue the dollar in order to bring back manufacturing. But if you peg gold to the back end of the yield curve, you have zero coupon bonds that you can bring back manufacturing. And over time, we can grow our way out of this problem. The only side effect I see is, without question, universal basic income for people who have no assets. Because in this environment, in an inflationary environment like I believe we're going to see, assets will save you, liabilities will destroy you, and if you are in dollars, you're destined to go broke in this environment. There is no other way, in my mind, to bring back manufacturing without blowing up the entire system, resetting it. And that's what I thought the last administration wanted to do. This is a little bit more nuanced. Give up on being the reserve, use the Stablecoin Act to synthetically create demand for treasuries that run the government, peg gold to the back end at a much higher price, devalue the dollar, bring back manufacturing, and get up on stage and say, you know what, we messed this up, but for our children, for our grandchildren, we need to do this. We need to bring back manufacturing, and here's how we're going to do it. Sean, in my heart of hearts, honestly, I believe this is where we're going, and either I'm stupid to say it or I'm on to something. Now, there has been a ton of talk about this recently, including a Russian foreign minister who just gave a speech.
Yep.
And it's almost verbatim to what I'm saying. And I've been saying this for months now. I'm not saying that I'm a genius or that I'm on to anything other than the fact that I followed all of these clues and I put them all together. And it just tells me that we have entered a new monetary system right now. And if you are not a contrarian, you're going to be a victim. If you save in dollars, you're going to go broke. And you buy gold not to become wealthy, but because it is wealth, that the biggest money in the world, not just the biggest money, the most well-informed money in the world, not only the central banks, but whoever has brought in north of $150 billion worth of gold to this country that we know of since the beginning of the year, and no one knows who it is. My guess, it's Secretary Treasury Bessent, doing it under the cover of the Exchange Stabilization Fund for national security. He can keep it quiet. And because no one's telling us who's doing this. Last month, in the first 3 days, now one last piece and I'll shut up. I know I've monopolized your time. So one last point. In the August delivery contract, I used to say to everyone, Sean, no one ever stands for delivery on COMEX contracts. Nobody, less than 1%, right? It's used to offset risk. It's used for a miner who wants to forward sell his production, or a company like mine who has 5,000 ounces of gold in their warehouse. If the price drops by $100, you're out $500,000. But if you short on COMEX the same amount, and the price goes down, that goes up 500,000. You're market neutral. No one ever stood for delivery. 1% or less. In the first 3 days of the August contract last month, 2,160 contracts stood for delivery. That's 2,160,000 ounces of gold. It's like $4 billion worth of gold. When those contracts posted, whether they roll over or they cash settle or they stand for delivery, 100% of them in the first 3 days, 100% stood for delivery. Doesn't mean it's leaving COMEX. A lot does, a lot doesn't. But what I'm getting at is that there is money here that you're talking billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars every month. These people, they know what's going on. They swim in the circles of the people that tell them the playbook. And all I will tell you is this, that I truly, truly believe gold will go higher than anyone thinks possible, and it ain't ever going to come back down because it's going to be pegged to a new monetary system, whether it be here in the United States or you can see it happening very clearly with the BRICS nations, and they are maybe a step or two ahead of us. Part of the reason why I think someone in the Trump administration said we need to double time this right now, or we're going to end up losing to their new monetary system that is tied to distributed ledger technology and gold. So I'll get your thoughts, your opinions, and I'm sorry for rambling so much.
No, I told you exactly why I wanted to get you back on. You're one of the smartest guys that I know when it comes to this stuff. And I would just say this for the audience. You can buy your precious metals from Miles Franklin, SD Bullion, a sponsor of mine. It doesn't matter. We want you guys to protect yourselves, period, full stop. You can call Miles Franklin, you can go to SD Bullion, but the point is you've got to get out of fiat dollars. It's a melting ice cube. So I want to talk a little bit about the Genius Act, stablecoins, Tether, Bitcoin, because I had the same thesis as you, and I did hear that soundbite from the Putin advisor talking about the USA's plan to inflate away their debt using stablecoins. And I would say Bitcoin. We'll get there. We'll come back to that. But just for the audience and for me, for those of us paying attention, for the guy listening who's got 10 ounces of physical gold in a safe that he's stacked over time, it's not a lot of gold, right? But it's more than most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues have. Most of the people I know don't own a single ounce of physical silver or gold. But for the guy who's got 10 ounces of gold, if it were to be revalued at $24,000 per ounce, that's 240,000 fiat dollars. Maybe he could sell it and pay off his house. But what would that do to the prices of bread and eggs? Would everything sort of stay the way it is today? Because we've seen gold go from 300 to 3,650, and yet I'm not seeing hyperinflation in the stuff we need to buy on a daily basis. What would this revaluation of gold do you think, to our purchasing power on a daily basis as Americans?
I think it would inflate it tremendously. It massively devalue the dollar. Part of the problem is, yes, I mean, you could argue, look, let's look at it from a slow perspective, the frog in the pot of boiling water. My parents got married in 1963, right after my dad graduated college. And his first job, he told me, paid him $6,000 a year. And he said, Andy, your mom and I could live comfortably on that in 1963. I looked it up. I said, that can't be true. The average salary in 63 was 10 grand. Now, first job out of college, okay, I believe that, but they could live comfortably on $6,000. The inflation has been slow and steady. The revaluing of gold would massively all at once devalue the dollar. And yes, I do believe you would see prices that would spike tremendously when you take a bold stance like that. And that's why I think you'll see universal basic income for people who would need it. And I think he would say, we're going to do this for a few years until we get our manufacturing back. We need to grow our way out of this, because the dollar would become worth less and less and less and less. Look, the dollar's down 11% this year, quietly. You know, gold's up 40% nearly. So that's a 50% swing. What it will do is preserve your purchasing power. Let's show you what I mean by that. You look at, let's go back 20 years. You can go back as far as you want. I can go 20 years, I can go to 1960, I can go back as far as you want. In 20 years ago, in 2005, the average price of a house was $240,000 or thereabouts. You can Google it, that's what you'll see. And gold was $450. So if we take $240,000 divided by 450, You get 533 ounces of gold. Today, the average price is like 420 or 430,000, something like that. So the dollar's devalued against an asset like real estate, almost in half, right? But that $430,000 right now, had you cashed in your gold, right now the $240,000 worth of gold, which was at 450, the 530 ounces of gold today is worth $1.9 million. So that gold, instead of buying it with using it, selling it to buy your house in 2000, 2005, and saving it under your mattress, earning nothing but dust, no interest, now buys you 4 houses. And the same thing would be true if you went back to 1960, where the price of gold was 35 bucks an ounce and the average house was $17,000. $17,000 divided by 35 is 485 ounces of gold. What's that gold worth today? Instead, you stuck it under your mattress, earning nothing but dust, no interest for the past 65 years. It's worth $1.772 million. That house that was $17,000 is now worth $420. Again, it buys you over 4 houses. So my point is that what gold does is it will maintain your purchasing power, and that's why people who have assets win in this environment. There is but no way, if they do this and devalue the dollar in order to make paying off the debt easier, and in order to make bringing back our manufacturing and being able to sell goods across the globe easier, there is no way but we wouldn't see elevated pricing. Part of the problem is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You ought to pull the L right out of that and call it what it is, BS. They tell us inflation is barely 3%. Yet, if you go back and go to John Williams' website, shadowstats.com, and he just uses the metrics by which they used to do this during the previous administrations like Carter and Reagan, you said you can add an 8 behind that. We're at 11% inflation. I think you would see massive double-digit inflation if he did this. It would be difficult for a while, but it is the lesser of 2 evils. As Richard Russell always said, you can inflate, which turns into hyperinflation. You can default, which blows the whole thing up, and now you have chaos. Or it might be the easiest solution. You default on the world reserve standard. You no longer want to be the world reserve, but you want to do something that inspires people to want to take our treasuries, not get our dollars back in return, get gold back in return. And by doing that at a 0 borrowing cost, you might just have the possibility of reshoring, retooling manufacturing, and becoming the engine of prosperity and production and ingenuity like we once were, coupled with the American ideals that hopefully find their way back. And maybe you have a chance, our children and our grandchildren have a chance to fight their way out of this problem, grow our way out of this problem.
Well, hard times make tough men. Easy times make soft men. And we might have to go through some hell in this country just to get our culture renormalized. Really, I'm honest to God. These softies, these demon vipers, these people that celebrate political murder, they've never had it bad in this country. And what might be coming is going to be pretty dark for those that don't have tangible assets. And we're going to come back to the Genius Act before we part ways. We're going to flush that out a little bit further. But I want to ask you about silver. David Jensen, who's been a guest on the show, talks about the market speaking of a gross shortage. He's brilliant, just like you. He says, how much silver is liquid and really available to market as a free float? And he talks about the ETFs. He talks about the COMEX, etc. What do you make of $42 silver in an era where the silver to gold ratio is still around, what, 85, 90 to 1? And they pull silver out of the ground closer at a ratio of 8 to 1, 9 to 1?
Yep.
Silver's precious. Even. Yep. Silver's very, very precious, but the banker paper has made it appear not so. And it seems like that system of control is finally crumbling. $42 silver. Once we get past 50, what happens? Do we get past 50?
We will get past 50, and I think it's happening right now. I'll answer that question, and I'll speak to David Jensen and his information. He's one of the best. I got to get him on my show because I read him all the time. But I focused a lot on the BRICS, you know that, and I have for a long time. And they has started building the BRICS grain exchange, and the gentleman who's behind it was given a speech last year, and he said, we produce and consume more grain than the folks do in the West, yet we have no control or bearing on its price, that happens on COMEX. But with the development of this exchange, that's going to change. Now, take that a step further and say, do you really think that they don't know what we're doing with precious metals? The Chinese bought the LME, the London Metals Exchange. Those are the base metals that you need to make the world go round. They own it, and they've built warehouses in China to stockpile the metal that is being traded on the LME exchange. Their Belt Road Initiative is all about working with countries that are underdeveloped and building gold and silver mines, railroad tracks, roads, bridges, maritime channels, oil refineries, oil rigs, everything, and bringing those underdeveloped countries, bringing their resources to market and bringing up their standard of living. Everything they do, including their partners in the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is all about resources and trade routes. So, all right, they get it. I believe they are using this against us. I talk with Sean Kuhn, the CEO of Dolly Varden. He says, Andy, these guys are flying China, who's the second largest producer of silver in the world and the largest producer of gold in the world. They're flying all over Latin America, in particular Peru and Mexico, and they're pulling gold and silver out of the ground before it's called gold and silver. They're buying doré and concentrate, which is a byproduct of the production process. Doré is a crudely refined bar before it gets fully refined, directly from the miners, disintermediating the market, sending it straight back to China, paying double what the West will, and refining it themselves. They understand where all of this is going. They're using the suppression against us. And what do I mean by that? Let's take David Jensen's numbers. David tells us that they have a 155 million ounce free float, or thereabouts, last time I checked. That's less than a day's worth of trading. He says that they trade roughly between 180 and 190 million ounces per day, every day. So they're trading more silver every day. Those are all deliverable contracts, than there is silver available. However, David will also tell you that those numbers that they post, the 180, the 190 million per day, are as much as 10 times understated, because they only post the final settlement numbers, not all of the trading that goes on through the day. If that is true, they are trading between 1.8 and 1.9 billion ounces of silver per day. That's 3.5 times global annual mine supply. That is 12, 15 times the float. What could possibly go wrong? At the same time, the head of the TOCOM, Japanese commodity exchange, says, oh, by the way, in London and in Switzerland, they're trading 3 million ounces of spot contracts for platinum every day. But he says there is no platinum in Loco, Switzerland, or London. What could possibly go wrong? And so what you have, and there are a lot of people, Tom Luongo being one of them, that Trump understands this. And it's the European banks that will be left holding the bag. These are the ones that are massively short, rehypothecating in London, where all of these contracts, if they stood for delivery, the whole thing blows up. I don't think you'll see that on COMEX, because it's an exchange with rules, and those rules can be changed to protect the participants, the banks. But in London, I could see a period of time where there is a failure to deliver. Now, you could argue that's already happened. For most of the year, the London Metals Exchange, the oldest in the world, 140 years, is a T+1 exchange. T is the trade day, let's call that Monday, +1 is Tuesday. On Wednesday, those bars should be moving. Imagine it's the SGT worldwide jewelry manufacturing company, and you have contracts for silver bars in London, and you need to fabricate your jewelry, and they say, Sean, dude, I'm sorry, brother. We don't have enough trucks or manpower to move those bars that you need to get for delivery. It's going to be 8 weeks. 8 weeks, right? But it's a T+1 settlement. So the Bank of England is short trucks and manpower and can't move those bars. That's what's called getting caught with your pants down. That's what's called cracks in the foundation. And if he's right, if David is right, and they're trading as much as 1.8 or 9 billion ounces a day with 155 million ounce short or free float, what you are looking at is the setup for a short squeeze of all time. And I truly believe you can only manipulate a market by pushing it in the direction that it is going. For most of my 35-year career, Sean, getting precious metals was not on the thought of the big money. It was typically U.S. equities, treasuries, real estate, the American dream. The United States shot itself in the foot literally when they weaponized the treasury market and the SWIFT system against other countries, in particular Russia and Iran, because as the world reserve currency, it is not our prerogative to say that. Now, this is when I need to highlight I am a patriot and I love this country, but let's look at it from the other side of the equation. Why these countries are dumping treasuries and dollars to buy commodities. We invaded Iraq 22 years ago looking for weapons of mass destruction. Sorry, they're not here. We destroyed their country, we blew up their regime, and we're still there today, 22 years later. Now, the world looks at that as not cool. And so when you add that on to gross mismanagement of fiscal policy, brain dead monetary policy, not to mention all of the nonsense that we saw the last 4 years that was so embarrassing to us patriotic Americans, like humiliating. And then you cross the Rubicon when you take Russians $5 billion in treasuries that we're holding because we don't like what you're doing. It's not for us to say as the reserve currency, it's for world opinion. We should not be judge, jury, and executioner. And worse yet, and this is not any comment on the war, okay? But we take that money, those $5 billion in treasuries, and give it to the military industrial complex to make weapons and give it to the country they're in the middle of a war against. You don't come back from that. And so what I believe is happening is all of these countries have become united in a common cause against Western hegemony. And they understand the Achilles heel of the West are the short positions in these commodities, where you push the price up high enough and you're talking some of the biggest institutions on the planet go belly up. And maybe that's what has been, maybe that's why you're seeing all this metal coming back, that whoever informed Trump said, look, the American banks are short as shit. They need to get this stuff back here. So before this all blows up in Europe, which it's going to, we need to have the physical. And that's part of a bigger plan. And that's just a maybe. I don't know. All I am simply saying to you is that if David Jensen, and he's a smart dude, if he's right, and I believe he is, yeah, it goes to show that $50 silver is easy. And if you take gold where we are right now, call it 36.50, and divide it by 70, which would be 10 times higher than it's coming out of the ground at, and the average ratio, price ratio, man's ratio, not God's ratio, which is the geologic, it has averaged about 45 to 50 to 1 for the last 100 years. Put it at 71, which would be an anomaly up on the high side. 36.50 where we are now divided by 70 is $52. Goldman Sachs says 4,000 base case, and if there's one hint at the Fed losing independence, the Fed has lost independence. Stephen Mirren going on the Fed, the architect of the Mar-a-Lago Accord, they've lost independence. Wait till the next guy gets on there for this Lisa, whatever her name is, when she's out there. Wait till he replaces someone else. They've lost independence. He said, Goldman says 5,000 like that. Let's put 5,000 gold and divide it by 70. You're at $71 an ounce. Divide it by 7, which is coming out of the ground at, you're at 714. Pick a number between 70 and 700. And it's realistic, geologically, historically, and where we are going. I don't know. I think silver, the word I think of is asymmetric. Lowest downside, highest upside. To me, it is the asset play of a generation. And I would like to say one last thing about gold and silver. I don't tell people to buy it to become wealthy. It is wealth. It's always been wealth for 6,000 years. Gold and silver cumulatively mentioned over 700 times in the Bible 6,000 years ago. And here we are, through 2 world wars and German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, everything. And the biggest money in the world and the most well-informed money in the world is gobbling it up across the globe like it's going out of style. All I can tell you is that something very, very big in my mind is happening with both gold and silver. It is not what we are being led to believe. I believe it is foundational for the new system that we are transitioning to, little by little, then bang, all at once. And I think if you save in dollars, honest to God, you're destined to go broke in this environment, if I'm right.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think anybody paying attention knows you're right. And if we can just circle back in the time we have left to talk about the Genius Act, let's talk about Tether, stablecoins, and Bitcoin. Now, Fundstrat's Tom Lee, a regular guest on CNBC, says that Bitcoin could still hit 200,000 before the end of this year. Now, I share that with the audience simply because the elephant in the room is crypto. And we talked about this advisor to Putin saying so. The special advisor to Putin says it's a scheme to shove $35 trillion in debt into crypto, devalue it, and reset the system. So, with that being said, let's take a look at Tether, which now holds $106 billion of U.S. treasuries, making it a larger creditor to America than G7 countries, Germany, and Italy. And to flush the idea out even further, when we think about the Magnificent Seven, Andy, Apple, Nvidia, Google, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, we think about the money they have in their corporate treasuries. If Trump or the administration or Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy, if anybody could convince these folks to start moving that money into Bitcoin, again, it's a self-reinforcing system. So even if the rest of the world, even if the BRICS, even if Russia says, hey, this crypto thing is just a scam to reset the system and keep the dollar king, well, it might happen anyway. Do you think I'm on the right track? What do you make of
Yeah.
Bitcoin, Tether, stablecoins, and the Genius Act? Why should the people listening to this broadcast care? Because most of them have been anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin for as long as I've been talking about it.
Well, I mean, I think I look, I think the adoption of the Stablecoin Act is you could argue, a wolf in CBDC clothing, so to speak, or a central bank digital currency in stablecoin clothing. I do believe that the on-ramps and the off-ramps will be monitored. When I listened to an interview with the gentleman who is the developer of BRICS Pay. BRICS Pay is the B2B side of things that the BRICS are rolling out. It is free from SWIFT intervention. It is the retail side of trade for the BRICS countries. It's now being rolled out to the Belt Road Initiative, by the way. So too is the BRICS Bridge, which is expanding their reach to 75% of human population right now. But one thing that he said that was really interesting was that, now, I would like to say, and I don't mean to I'm going to answer your question, but, I left my company in Minnesota because, even though I live in Florida now, because it's the only state that regulates a federally non-regulated precious metals industry. And we're required to take all of these classes, AML classes and anti-money laundering, and we're required to take the classes related to taxation and all of that kind of stuff. And I know this stuff well, and I've always known AML and KYC. That's know your client and anti-money laundering. Well, this guy says this technology is embedded with AML, KYC, and KYT software. I had to rewind it and listen to it again. What the hell is KYT? It's know your transaction. So these stable coins, which is synthetic demand for U.S. treasuries, along with perhaps the digital ID that is required to vote, you could argue that we are heading into a surveillance state. And this is the one part about the direction we are going under this administration that I don't particularly like. I think we are moving away from cash. We are moving to a system that will be dominated by stablecoins and surveillance. And that to me is the motivation for it isn't pure. As far as Bitcoin is concerned, I brought Michelle McCory on my staff to run our YouTube channel because I believe that the Bitcoin crowd and the precious metals crowd are both enlightened to the same degree for the same reason. They understand what's happening. Now, you can be a Bitcoin fan or not, but the point of it is that I think that our communities are far stronger together, united together. Your concept of understanding monetary history is stronger. Your portfolio is stronger. Come in with your Bitcoin profits and put it into physical metal, leaving your original investment there. For many people, I think Bitcoin is great, and has been great. I don't really know how Bitcoin fits into this, other than to say perhaps because you don't see any talk of it in terms of it being part of a strategic fund for the United States. But if indeed what he is saying regarding paying off the debt and devaluing the dollar, I mean, you could see a period of time where they devalue the dollar by revaluing gold. They espouse the virtues of Bitcoin. They get all the big money from the corporations, like you say, into Bitcoin. They jack the price way, way up, and then they peg it to a strategic wealth fund, or the government has a whole bunch of it and starts to pay off its debt with those inflated dollars.
Yeah.
Yes, I could see that happening. It makes great sense. It does. I don't love the stablecoin side of things, but I could see a period of time where they do goose the hell out of Bitcoin. They let them tell everyone to go into it. The government owns some, sells it in order to pay off its debt in total. Could that happen? Yeah, why not? Or certainly mitigate it quite a bit. In conjunction with the devalued dollar, it's something that could absolutely happen. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, Sean. I guess I am just someone who is more of an old school guy, but I am certainly of the mindset that the two communities are just far better off being complementary to one another rather than adversarial. And there might be a time to leave with Bitcoin to get out before some event like that were to happen. I don't think you'll see that with gold because I honestly believe worldwide it is going to be tethered, no pun intended, pegged to a new system where it doesn't come back down. Jim Sinclair always said that, and I believe it. There will be a floor once it is revalued, if indeed it is. That will be the floor by which gold stays. And I don't think you can say that about cryptos. I don't know how you feel about that. I'd love your opinion.
Yeah, no, the reason I brought it up is because A, I think you're right. Gold is never going back down. It will be used to anchor whatever system is rolling out, and those that have the gold make the rules. And I do think it would be smart to take some Bitcoin off the table and buy a lot more silver and gold in physical form. But what I was driving at is the fact that, and Bix Weir always makes the case that the guys at Tether allegedly are not great guys. I mean, this is a group of bad guys, part of the same cabal. And Tether now holds $106 billion in treasuries. And what happens is when they get the interest money from the treasuries, they use it to buy more Bitcoin. So it's sort of an endless feedback loop. Now, I don't know about the other
Yeah.
stable coins. I don't know how they all work. But in the case of Tether, it's backed by Bitcoin. So they are using Tether to buy the treasuries that Japan and China no longer want to buy,
Right.
thereby allowing the dollar to continue. So that's the
It's
feedback
interesting,
loop I
by the
see for
way,
Bitcoin.
Sean, real quick, they also are taking now a huge stake in gold mining, and they own gold already. And maybe to the same degree that they understand that the central banks would rather own gold than the US dollar. They're the two things that Tether are buying, you're right, uh, Bitcoin by doing the treasury issuance, taking the interest and buying more Bitcoin, and gold mining. So here it is again, it's assets, and the big money in the world is shedding dollars and buying assets. And whether your preferred choice is Bitcoin or gold and silver, that's for you. But that is it. I could see that happening, and that's why taking the profit off the table and buying gold, which will have a floor underneath it at some point, I think is the smartest thing the Bitcoin crowd can do. And realizing that we're more alike than not alike is to me the moral of the story, rather than having to be mutually exclusive of thought, looking at both sides of the coin. And actually, as my friend Robert Kiyosaki says, there's three sides: one side, the other side, and the edge. And he's right. Being somewhere in the middle on this stance is not a bad idea. And it goes back to what we said at the beginning of the discussion. It's about being open-minded. It's about having a discussion. It's about listening to other viewpoints and accepting what's right and maybe what you disagree with, and being better for it, rather than having such animosity and hatred and taking things to a level that no one ever wants to see again. So, yeah, I could see that happening. I could see Bitcoin go to levels that are crazy, only then to watch it collapse when the government sells a whole bunch of it in order to pay off its debt. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I think at this point, when we're so far down the rabbit hole, I think just about anything's on the table right now.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I bring on people constantly and I always let them pitch their wares because I like to pay it forward. And you've given us generous time today. We're going to show SD Bullion. That's a sponsor of mine, but Miles
I will
Franklin
tell you
was.
that I will tell you that in my mind, SD Bullion is one of the finest companies in America. I have nothing but respect for what they've built and who they are, and I've never heard a bad word about them, ever, never. And I have, if they're listening to this, I hope they know I have nothing but respect for them.
Oh, thank you.
So just,
Look, I think the feeling is mutual. And like I said, Miles Franklin was the first sponsor SGT Report ever enjoyed. And I'll leave a link to both companies below, guys, because you got to protect yourselves. And Andy, I'll give you the final word about Miles Franklin and how people can reach out. What's the best way to do that?
you know, there's a long story behind why I don't post all my prices, and a lot of people don't like that, and I understand. I post for very small amounts. People have to send us an email at info@milesfranklin to request our price sheet, which we update twice a week, and we do the best we can to match or beat anyone in the country. Info@milesfranklin.com. Any questions you have, any comments you have, you just want the price list, we'd love to work with you. What differentiates my company from any other, and again, I can't say nothing but high praise for SD Bullion, and honest to God, I mean that, is that the state of Minnesota licensing and bonding, and it's what differentiates us. That this is a federally non-regulated industry, and aside from SD, JM, APMEX, Money Metals, and us, and a few others, there are a lot of crooks out there in this industry. Stuff I see every day is just horrible. We are licensed, we are bonded, we are back checked annually in a very large surety bond. And state of Minnesota would say any company who doesn't do that and sells into the state, they'll be shut down or they will be sued by the Department of Commerce. And so we are held to a higher standard. Most of the companies in America won't sell into Minnesota as a result of that. They just skip it. The bottom line is, in a world where gold and silver are homogenous, if you buy a Gold Eagle for me or SD, you could never tell which one was which if they were just sitting there. What makes us different is that we've never had a customer or regulatory complaint in 36 years and 13 billion in sales, and we're licensed, bonded, and background checked. So that's the difference. And as much as we would love to work with your listeners and would be happy to do so, I defer with nothing but respect and high regards for the folks at SD Bullion. And well, if they're out of product, give us a call. We'd be more than happy to help. And I really appreciate you for letting me come on, even though you have a relationship with them. I'm no threat to them, and they're no threat to me. We should all be on the same team. There's enough to go around.
Yeah, well, that's how I feel about being an American at this point. I mean, it's get on board with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and true freedom, or get the hell out, folks. Now, I really appreciate you saying those nice things about SD Bullion. I'm sure the feeling's mutual, and you know the feeling's mutual from my end because I've known you for years, met you in person many times. You're a stand-up guy.
We
So
had
I'll look
lunch.
for
I
you.
remember having lunch. I
Yep.
remember that, and it was nice to meet you, and I hope our paths cross personally again. But I'll tell you, I have nothing but high respect for you. I know you have Bill Holter, who is one of my best friends and works with us on your show from time to time. You call me or text me or email me anytime, and I'd love to come on and chat. I'm just a phone call or a text away. And I wish you and your efforts nothing but the best. The world needs more people like you. You've been this way since I've known you, way ahead of the curve. And I thank you for letting me be a small piece of it today, Sean. Honestly, I do, and sincerely. And I look forward to hopefully picking up sometime soon where we left off.
Thank you. I appreciate you very much. And the feeling's 100% mutual. Info@milesfranklin.com, guys, if you want to reach out to Andy and get that price list. Our guest has been, well, the owner of Miles Franklin, milesfranklin.com, Andy Schectman. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, brother. Stay well, Sean.
All right. God bless you. And God bless these United States of America, guys. We only have one country. If we let these people burn it down, where are you going to go? Who are you going to